Okay, welcome to Chapter 6, Part 3. Survivorship curves. This is something we hopefully will have time to play a little game in class. Survivorship curves have to do with how likely you are to live. There's basically three curves. Those, type 1, type 2, and type 3. Type 1, basically nobody dies until old age, and then it drops off rapidly. Everybody croaks at the end. Type 2 is a constant loss curve. Basically, the chances of the chances of death each year are about the same. Like 10% of the population each year dies. Boom, just that. And then your type 3, or what we call early loss curve, is when most of your organisms die very early, but a few of them make it, but they live to long life. This is a lot of your plants. They produce tons of seeds, but a lot of those seeds are eaten. They never make a plant. So that's death. They don't do it. So these are the things. We have type 1, which we call a late loss curve. Everybody makes it till the end. This is much more likely to be seen in case-selected species in your top carnivores and humans. Basically, there's a tiny bit of loss, but it's very, very small until you get out to the very end, and then everybody starts kicking the bucket. Type 2 is a constant loss curve. This is seen with a lot of birds, small plants, rodents, that kind of thing. The chances of dying each year is basically the same. It's a certain rate. The death rate is easy. It's not like once you hit 5, the chances are you'll make it to 80. Nope. Basically, 10% of your population dies every single year, and that's what happens. And then your type 3, or your early loss curve. Most organisms die very early. Think sea turtles, plants, a lot of your big trees and those kind of things. Most of those little baby sea turtles, they're picked off. They're eaten by birds, they're eaten by organisms. Only a few make it to old age. But if they make it to a certain point, then chances are they're going to make it to old age, but most of them are going to die when they're young. Sad but true. Okay? And there's, of course, intermediates in this curve. Not everybody is a 1, 2, or 3. Some of them lie in between. But those are the three main types we have. And, of course, type 1 is much more likely to be a K-selected species. Type 3 is much more likely to be an R-selected species. And type 2 are just organisms in between. Okay, moving on to metapopulations. A metapopulation, the idea is if you connect small populations, they will function as one large population, a metapopulation. So that's why corridors and connecting habitats and making habitats large are so important, to make them function as one. So we need to connect our habitats. If you have a high degree of movement between your habitats, that's genetic movement, that's males and females, that's, more reproduction occurring, that is going to reduce your chance of extinction for a population. So metapopulations are really important. Okay, moving on. Next kind of topic. That was kind of some odd stuff that is in there, but community ecology or species interactions. These are all species interactions. How do organisms interact with one another? There's basically 4 large categories: competition, predation, mutualism, and commensalism, and then keystone species. So we're going to go through each of these. Competition. Competition is that. There's 2 types of competition: intraspecific competition and interspecific competition. Intra is within the same species. That is bear to bear, wolf to wolf, coyote to coyote, raccoon to raccoon. It only hurts the individual, not the species as a whole. Okay, so if you're just happen to be not so strong and you can't compete with the other raccoons, chances are all that's going to happen is you just aren't going to do as well and maybe not reproduce. Possibly could die if things get really bad, but chances are you're just not going to reproduce and pass on those potentially weaker genes. Interspecific competition has to do with 2 different species. The graph to the right is a very classic study of paramecium. A researcher grew both types of parameciums in culture and figured out their carrying capacity, and then put them together, and one highly outcompeted the other one for some kind of resource. You aren't going to have competition if there's no limiting resource. There has to be something that both of you want and are competing for to have competition. There's basically two types of, there's two outcomes, two potential outcomes for competition. And that's competitive exclusion, or competitive exclusion principle, or resource partition. In competitive exclusion principle, the idea is that one of you is going to be excluded from the area. You better migrate or you're going to die, or, you know, something else has to happen, but you cannot survive together in the same area forever trying to compete for this. So you got to get out, or chances are you are going to die off. With regards to the paramecium, there go my boys again. They know I'm doing videos. With regards to paramecium, if he continued it, the one would die out, completely die out. And that's resource or competitive exclusion. What's much more likely to happen, honestly, is resource partitioning to some extent. And this is when organisms figure out how to share a resource in some way, shape, or form. Okay, so in resource partitioning, the organisms figure out how to share the resource. Okay, there's basically three ways you can share a resource. You can do temporal resource partitioning, which means using it at a different time of the year or time of the day. So one of you becomes nocturnal and one of you is diurnal. So one of you is active at night, one of you is active during the day. Well, what do you know? No more competition. It could be seasonal. It is that you decide you reproduce earlier than you used to. The other organism produces later, and you're not helping, young man.
I'm trying.
Yeah, that's not working. Sorry. Dogs. Dogs. I have dogs.
No.
My dogs might be in the parade, by the way. Spatial resource partitioning is using different parts of the habitat. This is very, very common in some birds. They actually use different parts of a tree for nesting, and that's a spatial resource partitioning. I use the inside branches, you use the outside, you use the top, I use the bottom, whatever that happens to be. And then you can have morphological resource partition. This is usually difference in body size or shape. This is what you see in Darwin's finches. Somebody has a beak that's better for insects, one has a beak that's better for seeds, one has a beak that's better for small seeds, one for big seeds, that kind of thing. That's a morphological, you change. What happens is this. We have two birds who like, basically, one likes the small to medium seeds and the other one likes medium to large. So where they have that overlap, that's competition. And they'll shift and change their preference to reduce that competition. Till pretty soon you have one species prefers just large and the other one gets the small and the medium. However, I will tell you, this bottom graph, they usually don't move that far apart. There's usually always a tiny bit of overlap. That shows a minute amount of overlap, but that's probably not. It would probably be more. And the reason is there has to be quite a bit of competition to cause that movement or that morphological change. And when that competition gets pretty darn low, that will stop. So there will always still be some overlap between those two populations. And I'll go over this in class and show you what it would look like. Okay, so here, this is spatial resource partitioning. The different warblers like different parts of the tree. So they have basically learned to share the tree by everybody likes a different part. Okay, there's still some overlap there if you look at it. You know, the black-throated and the bay-breasted still have a lot of overlap. So chances are they're not going to be sharing the same tree. But the other ones, like the bay-breasted and the yellow-rumped warbler, they have no overlap. So they would have no more competition. Okay. Another type of interaction between organisms is predation. Predation is when one organism uses another as a source of food or resource. We have true predators, the ones that kill their prey. We have herbivores, one that consume plant, because guess what? Plants are organisms. So you're still a predator, you're just not hunting them. Parasites are predators. They just happen to live in or on the organism and usually don't kill them. Parasitoids, gotta love this one. They're organisms that lay their eggs in another organism. Gotta love that one. That's a good one. And so on. So, you know, often predators will help regulate prey populations and keep them in control, but these are all different forms of predation. Predators, can capture prey by walking, swimming, flying, pursuit and ambush, camouflage, and chemical warfare. So they don't all have to hunt. Deer can just walk over and eat the bush. Prey may avoid predation by running, flying, trying to have shells, barks, or horns, camouflage, chemical warfare, warning coloration, mimicry, deceptive behaviors, and deceptive looks. Plants will try to avoid predation by having thorns and bad taste and all kinds of things. So even plants have ways to try to avoid being predated. Mutualism is another form. Mutualism and commensalism. Those are two symbiotic relationships where two organisms are in close relationship with each other. In this case, mutualism, it's mutually beneficial to both of them. Both of them benefit. So these are two organisms that benefit from the interaction, like plants and pollinators, your blueberries and your honeybees, fish and cleaner shrimp, lichens, which are or a mutualistic relationship between fungus and algae, sea anemone and clownfish. That one's kind of iffy about whether it's mutualism or commensalism, but basically both of them benefit. So if both organisms benefit, that's mutualism. So here, this little bird is picking, I think that's an impala. He's picking parasites off the impala. The impala doesn't want parasites sucking their blood, so that benefits the impala, and the bird gets a free meal, so benefits everybody. Cleaner shrimp with the fish. He's cleaning all the parasites off the fish. Okay, the other chance is commensalism. Stop. Commensalism is when one organism is benefit and the other one is not harmed and could care less that they're there. It just does not matter. They're fine. The remora and the shark. Shark could care less. Remora gets protection and food from the sharks, meals, and stuff like that. It all works out. And here's a little shark chart showing you. In competition, both organisms are harmed. In predation, one is benefited and one is harmed. In mutualism, they're both benefited, and in commensalism, one benefits and one has no effect at all. Okay, and there's the shark and the remora. And there's a tree with a bromeliad. And bromeliads are basically, they grow on other trees, but they don't harm the tree. They're not parasitic at all. Okay, let's end there, and I'll talk about keystone species later. Bye.